Well. GT7 Spec 3, aka the 1.65 update, has of course dropped today, and I'm sure for many of you, like myself, you've been enjoying the new vehicles, Espace F1, and the new circuits, of course, new events, and various other things as well. But for those who are curious, before we proceed into the video, if you are curious for thoughts or gameplay of the DLC, the Power Pack, I'm not talking about that at all in this particular video. I will be featuring it on the channel, but not today. We're focusing on Spec 3 alone in this particular video. There are a ton of motor swaps added this time around, which is very fun to see as well, so that will be in its own separate video, most likely tomorrow. And of course, as always, the plan moving forward as far as the individual vehicles and stuff on the channel is I will be diving in depth into each individual of the 8 cars in its own separate video in the coming days on the channel. So my thoughts here will be relatively brief on each particular vehicle and more of an overview and, well, of course, a first look and first impressions of the update to see, for those of you who haven't come back yet, is it worth coming back, and also as a communal place for us to share our thoughts and experiences, and of course overall whether you enjoy the update. The concise version for me is, yes, I think it's a very, very good update, probably the best single overarching update since the whatever update it was that added the Scuderia and the Gallardo and the Subaru rally car and Swiss Alps, all that kind of stuff, the kind of updates which we came to expect in games like GT Sport, for example. Speaking of more to do, there are of course more career mode events even without the DLC Power Pack, the kind of stuff which you would usually expect, you know, some Sunday Cups, some front wheel drive, some this and that. As far as the new circuits, first of all, Yas Marina is a circuit which I've talked about before in terms of being one of the tracks which I would love to see in Gran Turismo, so that's great to see. It's a track which I have some experience on, mostly from Forza, but not a huge amount, nowhere near most of the other tracks in the game, so it was fun to get back into that, and I plan to drive there a lot more. In terms of Villeneuve, this is actually, well, you'll see later on more so in the video, the first time I've ever driven on the track in any game, so I probably shouldn't really go with that kind of footage, showcasing my first few turns in anger on the course, but there you go. And when it comes to first impressions, it doesn't really get much more of a first impression than that, literally the first time I've ever been on the track. In terms of Yas Marina, if you're familiar with Forza and various other games, or even F1 in general, then you probably know the track pretty well in terms of the layout. It's always struck me as being a bit more of a race arena rather than a race circuit in a more traditional sense, so you don't have like grass verges and sand traps and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty much, you know, flat circuit, very encased within this arena, and it gives it more of like a battleground kind of feel, which I think is kind of cool. And it also makes it very unique, visually speaking, as well as some of the architecture of the track. In terms of Villeneuve, like I said, totally new experience to me. Some interesting compound corners. That very early hairpin caught me out a couple of times, and the first time that I drove there was in a Formula car, which again you'll see right here in the video. This one reminds me of kind of two tracks put together, one which I'm a huge fan of and one not so much, and it will be sacrilege when I tell you the track that I'm not a huge fan of, because Villeneuve actually kind of reminds me of if you put Imola and Monza together. I love Imola. It's one of my favourite circuits, and another one which I would love to see in Gran Turismo. Monza, I'm not a fan of. I know it's sacrilegious to say, but Monza just doesn't really do it for me for whatever reason. Bit too short of a track, bit too simple, but not in a good way. In my book, though, you put those two things together, and you kind of get something a little bit like this. And I will definitely say that I prefer Yas Marina out of the two, but this is a fresh new face, which is very fun to see. Some of the high walls remind me a little bit of some of the city courses, a little bit Bathurst-esque as well in some sections. But yeah, two very cool new additions for sure. Before we dive into each of the individual cars, which of course is going to be the meat of the video, what about any kind of glitches, bugs, or physics changes? Well, I haven't noticed any glitches myself. I'd be very curious if any of you have down in the comments, so of course drop those down there. But for the physics, it has changed. It's actually more forgiving, and a bunch of people on the Discord for the channel, there's a link to that if you want to join, have said that they felt the same. The cars feel almost a little bit more dulled, but not in a negative way. At least that's the way I would describe it. Not dull as in boring, but dull as in not quite as twitchy as some of them were before on occasion. And it's not like Gran Turismo was the most difficult, you know, physics engine to get used to, but yeah, it feels a little bit more like Gran Turismo of old, which kind of lines up with some of the other choices, such as, of course, bringing back the Renault Espace F1. aka My single favourite car of the entire Gran Turismo franchise. I've got one sitting on the shelf right next to me as I record this in model car form. And yeah, it's a legend for those of us who grew up playing Gran Turismo, especially if, like me, you started way back in the Gran Turismo 2 era or thereabouts. Yeah, it's a monstrous car, so let's jump into the vehicles. In an overarching sense, you're looking at 7.8, just under 7.9 million credits for the 8 new vehicles. So when you even it out, that doesn't sound too bad. Under 8 million for 8 cars. Crazy thing is, if you take the Mines Skyline out of that, it goes down to 4.8 million, which is a pretty massive difference. So just like the Nismo, it is, in my opinion, ridiculously overpriced, and I do not care how much they're worth in real life. I do not care how legendary of a car it is. This is a game. It is not a buying and selling car dealer simulator. Getting back to the point, the Espace, first of all, is 2 million credits. It is, of course, in the Legends dealer, and I think that is fantastic on all fronts. In fact, I would say, and of course I'm biased, but for those who are, really looking forward to, I don't know, an Aston Martin Valkyrie or a Lexus LFA or whatever the case may be, that for you is probably what this is for me. That one car that I was really, really looking forward to. Except in this case, I wasn't really looking forward to it until really a few weeks ago, because I never thought it actually would arrive in the game. I love the fact that it's 2 million credits, because that's exactly what it was back in Gran Turismo 2. I actually kind of thought it would be more like 3 million credits, but 2 is even better. Of course, if you are going to get the car, you need to get in there while the getting's good, because the Legends dealer does of course start to rotate around again. And if you don't have the cash, you actually can still drive the car in a seasonal time trial style event. And I feel like that was probably quite a planned choice on Polyphony's part, to allow more players, or as many players as possible potentially, to enjoy the car. In terms of enjoying it, well, yeah, it's a pleasure to work with. You can barely do anything to it, which I'm actually fine with. Again, very Gran Turismo 2 style. And at the end of the day, it's got a Formula 1 car engine, so you wouldn't really expect to do a huge amount to it. It's awesome though. 800 horsepower, 1300 kilos. As we suspected, it has a point level but no associated class. This would have been a Group X car for sure in GT Sport. It's a superb car to drive. It has the kind of weight and the size which you would expect from it. 1300 kilos still undercuts most GT3 cars of around the 2010s kind of era anyway, so it's hardly a heavy vehicle. And one particular thing that I love about the Espace is that it's got that little bit of bounce out of corners which the real car has. If you look at footage, you can see from how stiff the springs and dampers are that it does bounce over chicanes, and you can kind of feel that in the game. The sound is fantastic. We have to move on though, because of course I could talk about the Espace all day, and I probably will, to be fair, in its own video, so we'll get to that in a few days time. Next up, let's move to the Ferraris. First of all, the Ferrari GT3 car, the 296. I didn't really have any kind of expectation for this one either way, positive or negative. I'm not a fan of the 296 in road form or racing form. I just find it a bit of a boring looking Ferrari. I'm not a fan of these baby Ferraris like the Dino and the 296. Yeah, they're quick for their time, but it just doesn't do it for me. I like my Ferraris big, beefy, imposing, and over the top, which is probably why my favourite of theirs is the FF. Doesn't get much more big and beefy than that as far as Ferraris go, but this is actually a really solid car. Just under 600 horses, 1.2 mil. It weighs in at 1280 kilos, so nothing too crazy. And the reason why I found this better than I was expecting is because it's actually a little bit on the heavier side, which is probably again partially due to the reworked physics, but I thought it would be a bit twitchy, and it actually isn't. It's just a pleasure to work with. In terms of the road car, well, of course that's going to feel very different, because for one thing, the road version has the hybrid system, and then secondly, ironically, much like the Beetle RSI versus the Beetle Cup car back in the day, the road car's got way more power than the racing version. As I said, the race car's got 599 horses, kind of appropriate for a Ferrari. The road version has 818, thanks to that hybrid system. It weighs 1470 kilos, which fair play to have a hybrid weigh that little, comparatively little these days. That's very good. The point level on the race car, not that it matters too much, is 743. On the road car, it's 683. So really not too much of a difference, given that one is a race car and one is a supercar. Incidentally, in terms of pricing on the 296, it's $500,000 in road form, so I would say both are pretty well priced. $500,000 seems maybe a little bit too much for a car like this, but if you recontextualize it as a random 800 horsepower supercar, yeah, I guess that sounds about right. In terms of performance, I definitely enjoyed the race car more. Sounds like an obvious thing to say, but usually it's the opposite for me. I do tend to prefer road cars. The 296, for me, it feels a bit too fussy in terms of its handling. It feels heavier than it actually is. The hybrid system feels fine, I guess, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it has a huge amount of extra grip over the front end or anything like that due to it, like you'd usually expect. And it feels like, well, as I said, it sort of gets in its own way a little bit. I think the most succinct way to describe my overall thoughts on this car, before we talk about it in its own review, of course, are it kind of feels like a Maserati MC20 but too much up its own backside. Like, there's too much going on, and it kind of muddles the purity of what could have been just a really nice, simple supercar. And to me, the Maserati feels more simple, more analog in comparison to this. I'm, to be honest, not a fan of either of these cars having V6s. The Maserati would have been much more interesting with a V12, but hey, that's the modern era, I guess, and there's not much you can do about that. Next up, let's talk Formula cars. Of course, my first time driving on Villeneuve, it's pretty appropriate, I guess, to be in this car, a just over 700 horsepower, naturally aspirated screamer. It's got some really cool visual upgrades. Of course, loads of people have already done tons of different liveries on it. I would love to see some of my favourites popping up, like the Benetton B186, the Williams FW15C, maybe some others as well. To get back on target though, this car is ironically cheaper than a bunch of the other cars here. It's cheaper than the Mines, it's cheaper than the Espace, it's cheaper than even the Ferrari GT3 car at exactly 1 million credits. It outclasses the F3500A in terms of weight, not by a huge margin, but it weighs barely 500 kilos, so super low weight, nice high revving, naturally aspirated engine. I didn't, again, much like the Ferrari, have really much in the way of expectations either way. I thought I would probably enjoy it, but I didn't want to get my hopes too high overall because I'm not the biggest of Grand Prix car fans, generally speaking, which is why I do like the ones that are a bit weird or oddball, using alternative ideas, etc. This one though is just simple, pure Grand Prix fun. It feels like just that gone era of simpler aero, big chunky tyres, screaming engines, and not quite as quick lap times, but kind of more of that raw fun factor. Really fun car to drive, and very, very good handling as well. It's far less twitchy, you don't have to worry about turbo lag, it's great. And in terms of motor swaps, it's pretty interesting as well because you can swap the other F3500 engine into it, and even the Renault Espace F1 engine you can put into this car instead. Next up, we'll talk about a car which of course I've raised so many times on the channel, up there with the DC5 Integra in terms of being such an obvious car, one of those cars which is so obvious that it seems more strange that it wasn't even an update car. It should have just been in the game from day one, you would think. The Mitsubishi FTO, the GP version R in particular, this is simply put one of the best front-wheel drive cars in the game. If you were looking forward to this car and haven't driven it yet, you are going to love it. The visual mods, some of which you'll see here, are pretty nice as well. You can do some touring car stuff, maybe not quite the full-on touring car version that we used to have because it's front-wheel drive, and of course you can't change that. Then again, there is a certain Tavon 3.0 FTO from back in the day, which you probably could do a very nice replica of, so watch this space for that one in a perhaps future special projects. But yeah, it feels fantastic. I'm very curious to see how it handles more power, because I'm driving it here, of course, for the first impressions in basically standard form. This is completely untouched. There are some cars from, 20, 30 years ago which couldn't even handle 200 horses without having significant torque steer or understeer. There's absolutely none of that. In fact, I was shocked by how planted the FTO feels through corners. There's almost no body roll at all, beyond what you'd even expect from an Evo. So it almost feels like it's bugged out and like too good. And as you would assume, it is in the used car dealer, so once again, get it while you can because it will come back around for about 35 grand, so not bad at all. Next up, a car which I know many of you aren't really that interested in, but I actually was quite curious to see how it would pan out, because this is the most powerful car of the entire update, and I feel like it's easy to gloss over that, but this actually has legitimately more horsepower than anything else here, and it's up against some incredible competition. Now, of course, it's also by far the heaviest vehicle and the most restricted in terms of how useful it's going to be, because of course it's electric. It weighs 2,503 kilos, which is 3 kilos more than my 21-foot V8 hearse sitting outside my house, just to put into perspective how ridiculously heavy electric cars are, and I will say it's better than you'd think. I would say the handling and the road holding are better than the Hyundai Ioniq. I know for some people that's not saying much, but I actually thought that car was quite good when it was first added, and yeah, you're not going to be able to do a huge amount to it, of course, generally speaking, but if this is a rolling ad, I would say it's probably a better ad than a lot of them are. Good looking car, it's got a hell of a lot of horsepower, it is pretty fun, it can do up around 160 miles an hour, so not bad by electric car standards. I tell you what though, the most disappointing thing for me at least about cars like this is how much more it makes me want stuff like a Rimac or a Lotus Evija in the game. The kind of electric stuff which actually could win races all the time. And last, and well, let's be honest, kind of least, probably not for everyone, but at least for most of us, the little Panda. It's a 30 horsepower, 600cc legend for sure, but it's not even the slightly more powerful version which we used to have in the series. Of course, this is a legendary design. It's got some really cool, really cute kind of Panda 4x4 style visual upgrades with the roof racks and the spotlights. I was really hoping for stuff like that. In terms of modification, this is, spoiler alert, the only car out of all 8 that I actually had to modify in order to even keep up with the pack in an event to get this footage. It was so slow, it couldn't even catch up to the next car around Goodwood. In one of the new events, it was that slow. So I fully maxed out the engine, fitted a limited slip diff, and nothing else. It takes you from 30 horsepower to more like 145. And of course, it doesn't weigh much to begin with, 650 kilos. You can drop it to below 600. I will say it still struggles to get to the front of the pack, but obviously that's a very bare bones all-power build that I did for it. And yeah, it's a charming little car. Again, of course, it's in the used dealer, as you'll have seen in the video. It's one of those like the Unimog and various others that it doesn't really matter if it's in the game, but it definitely does have more of the spirit of older Gran Turismo titles. In terms of other new stuff, of course, I will fit the rolling text on screen so that you can pause at any time if you do want to read through that. But aside from physics changes and various other things, you can, as I said, check out the Espace in the seasonals. There's a seasonal style event for the Polestar as well, if you don't want to bother buying it and you can just drive it instead. And there are new scapes, of course, quite a few new scapes actually, some very, very good looking ones at Villeneuve and Yas Marina. And of course, with the addition of the higher collector's level, jumping from 50 to 70, for those of us who have already gone way beyond that in trying to collect all of the cars in the game or having multiple ones, you get unlimited invites to virtually all, in fact I'm pretty sure it is all of the invite manufacturers, so like Porsche, Bugatti, and it doesn't have a time limit anymore. So stuff like that I think is very cool. It should have already been in there. Of course, that's the kind of thing that shouldn't really need to be updated because it was a stupid idea to begin with. And the final beautiful irony of this particular review is that after getting these new bonuses and leveling up and all that kind of stuff and the new collection books, do you know what car they gave me for the spin? After how many years? They gave me a Ferrari FXXK. The car that I'd been waiting for so long to be able to buy with an invite, which I'd never gotten, and finally bought one, and now they've given me one, which of course I sold for 1.6 mil. The poetic irony of that. And having not even played the DLC, I can say you don't even need to enjoy this. I haven't done it yet, it's just going to be a bonus on top, hopefully. Of course, we'll have to see when I actually play it, but for now, if you were looking forward to Spec 3, I think you really will enjoy it. It's one of those kind of updates which you actually want to see in GT7. Certainly one of the best, if not the best, single update for GT7 so far, which is ironic to be able to say so deep into the game's life. Give me your thoughts down below. What's the standout car for you? You already know what it is for me. And as of tomorrow, we'll be diving more so into engine swaps, various other videos as well, alongside of course my ongoing content for each car review within these 8 vehicles as well. And technically there will probably be some kind of variation of new cars to talk about, thanks to the 6 quote-unquote exclusive cars from the DLC as well, which are just remodified versions of existing cars in the game like the Beetle, etc. Stick around for all of that, there's a lot more still to talk about, and for now, thanks for watching.